Everybody, thanks for watching and thanks for taking the time to purchase and support. Welcome to Buddhism Part 3. Now, if you guys haven't seen the energy and the frequency and vibration DVDs, definitely want to check those out before you watch this and get that information. There's a lot of good information in there that's going to correspond with this particular DVD. So definitely want to check those out. But, it's a lot that we have to get into as far as Buddhism. It's a lot more that Buddhism entails as far as, looking at what we have been, studying and the DVDs prior to this, as far as frequency and vibration and just, spirituality in general, looking back at ancient Kemet and looking at where this stuff stems from, how we can tie everything together and see how it fits a big picture that a lot of people are starting to see and put together. Now, the thing is, when we look at Buddhism and we see, as I showed you guys, how we can find it in ancient Kemet before, Hinduism, before Buddhism or what have you, and how they were basically trying to tell us the same stuff, talking about the same type of spirituality. And it's amazing how we go back to that time and, you have these ancients doing things, just spiritually, naturally. We basically went back there and we looked at what they was doing and we took what they was doing and basically interpreted it any way that we felt we should interpret it. We gave it names, we gave it words and categories and what have you. But to them, this is stuff that was culture, that was everyday life. It's stuff that they did all the time. It was just natural and normal to them. And we look at a lot of this stuff into us in this world, in our society, what have you. We see this stuff as primitive, as, kind of weird and crazy. We call a lot of these things rituals, sacrifices and stuff that means bad things to us. But to these people, to the ancients, this stuff was normal. They understood what it was and what they were doing. They understood the meaning behind it and the science behind it. See, we took those aspects, those things that they was trying to get out of these so-called rituals in their culture. We took these things and we identified them with math and science and things that we invented, things that, human beings made up. But to the ancients, this was just normal stuff, normal common sense stuff, normal things that they understood how to do to bring about results, to change their reality. And when you start to understand that and think about it in those contexts and just say, this is something that is natural, there's power to it. These people were doing this stuff for a reason. You start looking at it in a different light and understanding that in order to get out of it what the ancients got out of it, you have to embrace it the same way they embraced it, as far as putting it in your ordinary life, your everyday life, and not thinking about this stuff in terms of ritual, sacrifice, math, science, or what have you. This is how we label this stuff. But to the ancients, there was no such thing. They didn't use these words. This is natural things, natural stuff. And I want to say that to get it across to people to understand that you have been basically deceived by words and wordplay. Words are magic. You have to understand that it was created for a specific reason, to deceive you and to confuse you. But you have to look through that and understand that at a particular time, these words did not exist, yet the power of what you're bringing together using words was always here, and it has a purpose. Now, when I look back to ancient Kemet and I seen karate, when I seen the depictions of martial arts, to me at first it was just like, well, okay, wow. This stuff was here so long ago. We thought it came from the Orient, came from, the Asians, but here it is in ancient Kemet, old. And to my knowledge, there isn't any depictions of martial arts that predate what we find in ancient Kemet, which we can find going back to 3000 BCE. So unless somebody can produce anything that shows that they had these particular skills and was putting stuff out before then to us, the Egyptians came up with it. They developed the techniques or what have you. But from looking at it, you would just think, hey, this is about, self-defense, martial arts, protection, Kemet always was under threat at some point in time. But when you go back 3000 BCE, it wasn't too much problems that you would think they would need to develop such a, technique and a strategy. So in looking at it on the surface, I was thinking, okay, well, this is the purpose. This is what it was for. But as I have explained and showed you guys, the ancient Egyptians knew the body. They knew about the mind. They knew all of this stuff, and they put it in so many different things. Now, I have talked to you about how hip hop music, how we have the subliminal message, how we have the controlling of our minds and music, and how music affects the brain. I've talked about this countless times and will continue to talk about it. But you have to understand that the ancient Egyptians already knew about it. They understood how music affects the brain. So when you see ancient Egyptian depictions of music bands, them playing musical instruments, we would call it today classical music, developing the mind, stimulating the mind, as I talked about. When you see depictions of them dancing, singing, we would call this stuff, ballet. R&B or soul or whatever. We will call it what we call it. But to them, this was just natural. So when you see these depictions of dancing and, and singing and bands playing and all kinds of stuff that we look at today and we take an entertainment value from it. And we look to ancient Kemet and we would think the same, but it's a lot more to it that the ancient Egyptians understood, and they knew how to get everything out of it. So when we look at, martial arts, when we look at this stuff, these depictions, and we say that, this stuff is martial arts, we think about Kung Fu, we think about karate or what have you, when we see these depictions, but to them, it wasn't such. Of course, they didn't use those names, but the ancient Egyptians understood the movement. They understood what the stuff was really about and what it would do. They understood that these movements not only, strengthened the muscles, but it sharpened the mind. These movements allow energy to flow through the body, to flow in different parts of the body. Different movements just loosen up the body and allow energy to flow, so you can feel energy flowing freely through different parts of the body. And this is one of the main reasons why they did it. It not only, helped sharpen the mind, help you connect muscle memory to, cognitive memory to your consciousness, but it also helped with meditation. It also helped you strengthen the muscles so you can sit in the lotus position, a meditative state, for long periods of time. And this is one of the ways that they did it. This is one of the ways they developed to help you deal with those issues. And this is one of the processes you had to go through in becoming, like, let's just say, like a grand master or a master, or moving up as far as in the ancient Egyptian mystery school. Martial arts was one of it. And you had to understand, about the body, of course, and that these movements were to loosen you up, to help energy flow freely. What the Asians talk about chi flowing through the body, they understood all of this, and that energy needed to flow freely, and you needed to be loose and be able to be comfortable to sit in that lotus position for long periods of time to meditate. So they worked on these things, and this was the purpose of this stuff, to not only, help you with meditation and help energy flow, but to also give you skills as far as movement and combat ability, in any type of altercations that might occur. So when you look at the ancient Egyptians and understand that they had basically what we call classical music, as I said, develops the brain, stimulates the brain, makes you smarter, makes you retain more knowledge. They understood this. When you look at the depictions and see that they had forms of ballet that help with movement, grace, something that help you develop energy-wise. All these things that we see that we find today in our society that we look at too as being refined, showing that these people have class, that they are of a high status because they, partake in such events. So as I talked about in the Calculated Destruction of the Black Man and Woman, about how they got all dressed up and fancy and went to watch people, put on tutus and do ballet and, play classical music or what have you. This was because they associated these things with, wealth, refinement, or what have you. And many of the people there had absolutely no clue that this stuff goes back to energy, consciousness, and that it's going to develop you better in these areas and help stimulate you. So they basically took the good things from us, from ancient Kemet, the things that will help us develop and stimulate us spiritually and physically. They took these things out of ancient Kemet, kept them for themselves, told us nothing about it. We just watched and wondered, like, what are these crazy people doing? Took it for themselves. We were stuck to, just develop jazz, the blues, singing about our sorrows and pain. Not listening to music that will help stimulate us. And don't get me wrong, you have the blues and you have jazz that does create good stimulation, but not as such as what classical music, because when you have blues and you have jazz not always, but blues, you have words attached to it. Having words attached that is not going to be, stimulus to the actual sound. So words that's not going to help develop the sound, then it's really no point in having the words. The words could be a problem because, as I talked about, when you combine words with music, that's a message. Words are powerful. You got to be careful what you say. So you don't really want to associate certain words in musical form because they have dual meaning. It's better to just have the music. This is something deep that we'll get into down the line when we get more into music, but the ancient Egyptians understood this. This is why, as I talked about in the Frequency DVD, about them combining Satan and putting him with music and, the music industry, and how the word was God and Satan was the music. And when you combine the two, you have basically persuasion. And that's what it was about. So when you understand the parable and what it was talking about, Satan basically played the music, the choir director, you could say, while God was the word. And he spoke, and you combine them and you have song, which music can be stimulating and persuasive. Music on its own without the words can be persuasive. So this is just a whole bunch of things that just go along, with everything. But understand how they took classical music, they took ballet, they took everything that would stimulate them and develop them to be higher and function in higher brain capacities than us. They kept for themselves, and we end up with gangster rap, hip hop, R&B, stuff that is destroying us mentally and physically, causing the downfall of our civilization, causing the downfall of us. And this is what we have to deal with, and this is what they allow us to promote and make our people rich off, because it's destroying us more than it's helping us. So we got to look at this stuff and understand that if it wasn't ancient Kemet, it was there for a reason. And this stuff we need to come back to and start, developing more ourselves and getting more engaged in ourselves, instead of leaving it to the Europeans to have and take and control when it came from us. And it's crazy when you look at other civilizations, you look at people throughout history that are known for things. They're known for something specific. You look at countries that are known for something specific, groups of people known for something specific. And then you go back to ancient Kemet and you find out, guess what? It was there first. And it's like, damn, no credit was given. Nobody said anything. It's just we was led to believe that certain people developed certain things. But then when we go back to ancient Kemet, we see that it was there first. And, somebody always throw that little depiction in there, whether it's believed that the ancient Egyptians discovered it or that, it was found first here in ancient Kemet, always to leave doubt that it's possibly somebody who developed it before them. But there's no proof. So it's weird when you find that kind of stuff. But when you go back and you see the depictions of martial arts and you think about, Bruce Lee, who we'll get into a lot in this video, and you think about just martial arts in Asia, a lot of people don't have no clue exactly where it came from. We just all assume it came from, ancient Asia with the Asians. But when you go to ancient Kemet and look at martial arts, they call it lotus fighting, which we understood how important the lotus was to ancient Kemet. It symbolized rebirth, with the opening of the petals when the sun rises and the closing of the petals at night. They related it to the sun, of course, which the sun was revered. When you look at it in Buddhism, of course, the same thing. The lotus symbolized spiritual awakening and purity, because you had a lotus, which is also called a water lily, which basically sprang up, from the dirt, the dirty water, from the water, what have you, and came out and, opened up perfectly clean, pure, no dirt, no mud, no soot, or nothing on the petals. It always sprang and opened up clean and clear. And the Buddhists looked at it as, the lotus made a conscious decision to basically say, I'm not going to get dirty. I'm going to come up, I'm going to be clean, I'm going to be pristine, in good condition, and I'm going to show off. And this is how, the Buddhists looked at it, so they associated with spiritual enlightenment, the lotus, which is why Buddha, you always see him sitting on top of the lotus in the lotus position, which is why they call it that, because they associate meditation, of course, with spiritual enlightenment as well as the lotus. And we see, as I talked about before in Buddhism, how it goes hand in hand with Osiris and the lotus and, Shiva, what have you, everything we find with the lotus. Now, and I showed you in Buddhism 1 and 2 about how there is no way you can look at Buddhism and not trace it back to ancient Kemet and see that that's where it came from. It's clear as day when you look at this stuff. So you can do your own research on that and just look and see the comparisons. There's just no way. So you have to think about, ancient India, trading, and what was going on around that time. Now, we know they had Heraklion, which sank. The whole city I talk about that Frank Gaudio discovered, Heraklion that sank, and this was a huge trading port that so many civilizations came in and out and did trade. We talked about in Ancient History Part 1 about Tyre, about how, the Phoenicians did trade there and how another huge trade port. But when you look at where India is and think about so much of the trade going on in those two places, and, of course, in India, they wasn't going to take that long, camel caravan ride all the way up to Tyre or Heraklion to do trades. So they had to sail across, which was a lot easier, into Ethiopia, and vice versa. The Africans sailed into India to do trade. Now, when you look at, the map and you understand, of course, we have the Nile. We have the Nile all up and down the Nile. You had little trade ports there and people that traded up and down the Nile. And when you pay attention, you have the Nile coming down into northern Sudan. And it basically separates, like right at the middle part of Sudan, and you have it going one way towards Ethiopia. It basically goes into Ethiopia and curls up into Axum. And you have the Blue Nile there. That's the Blue Nile that curls up into Axum in Ethiopia. Then it keeps going south, and you have the White Nile. But the Nile definitely went into Ethiopia with the Blue Nile. You have there one of the greatest African civilizations right off the Nile. You have the Aksumite Empire, another African civilization where you had African kings and rulers that ruled there, and they had a thriving port there and a thriving civilization right off the Nile that a lot of people have no clue about. Now, we're going to get into this history because it's very important. Now, it basically goes with everything anyway. It's one of the things a lot of people don't understand about the connection between Africa and Rome and how you can see how they was coming into Africa a lot and doing things. This is completely hidden from history, and it's stuff that they just don't talk about, because when you understand history, it's like, what the fuck was Rome doing? It's how you can see who's in power and who was doing what when you understand about these African empires that once existed. So we're going to talk about this because it fits and it goes in, with the line of history. So understand, one, when you talk about the Aksumite Empire, we're talking about, these are the kings that they call Negus. When you hear people refer to kings as Negus, the black African kings, this was in Ethiopia. So you had this whole empire last from about the 1st century AD up until like the 4th century AD, I believe, or the 10th century AD, I should say. And it lasts for a long time. This was a thriving area. It was once part of the Kushite Empire at one time, and it separated, and you have this huge thriving empire that Rome knows a lot about. So you had the King Ezana, basically convert the civilization to Christianity. Now we have correspondence between Constantine and King Ezana. Constantine calling him his brother, his friend. So we have letters that they wrote, correspondence between each other with them being on good terms. Now, I have a lot of knowledgeable Christians, the ones who know some things, who think I don't know anything. I have it's a lot of debates I do behind the scenes that you guys don't know. People don't want to do it, video-wise or, publicly. They want to do it in messages or what have you. But I have had quite a few people bring up King Ezana as far as giving validity to the Ethiopian Bible and giving validity to somehow the Africans developing Christianity in the Bible. The problem is when you get a person who does actual research, you know, one of the things that this land is famous for, the Aksumite Empire is famous for, is its obelisks. They have a bunch of obelisks there and a bunch of stelas there showing the connection to Nubia and ancient Kemet. So we know we find stelas in Nubia, we find obelisks in ancient Kemet. We know that they came down. The knowledge right there flows right into their land. Obviously, the ancient Egyptians was coming down and trading. We know about the connections between them all. So you have the ancient Egyptian influence with these obelisks and these stelas in Ethiopia and the Aksumite Empire before, you know, King Ezana converted to Christianity. The knowledge was lost and there was no real connection to the understanding of what was going on back then and what the connection was with ancient Kemet. So you had this king come about and convert to Christianity, you know, most likely for political reasons or political gain or what have you. And that's what happened. And when you put in, you know, Constantine into the mix, you can see exactly what it was. But you have for centuries, the Romans, which the Romans used Aksumos as a trade port, a trade route. They basically did a lot of trade out of that port. This is why Constantine and King Ezana was so cool, because he allowed them to do a lot of business there. So understand that. So we understand that they took, you know, so many artifacts from out of there. We have in 1932, you have Rome basically come in there and pick up one of the obelisks, you know, that they knocked down a long time ago. I showed you the pictures that they was just pulling down. They came in there and it was pulling down the obelisk to basically try to hide the connection with ancient Kemet. And they came in Aksumos and pulled down a lot of these stelas and a lot of the obelisks, and they broke. A lot of them broke, you know, when they came down. So you had in 1932 Rome come in there and basically pick up the pieces of one and take it back to Rome. So when you go into Britain, when you go into a lot of these museums, you find a lot of ancient Egyptian artifacts, a lot of African artifacts, because the Brits, you have the Romans, you have a lot of these civilizations, these people coming into African civilizations, ancient civilizations, and stealing artifacts. If it wasn't for people like Richard Pankhurst, who basically leads a team who goes into a lot of these countries and try to get the artifacts back, you know, the Ethiopians wouldn't have gotten back the obelisk from Rome. They got it back in 2005 because they led a team and did a lot of lobbying to get that obelisk returned back to the Ethiopians. In 2005, you know, they got it returned back. But you had the Africans and you had a lot of European groups who have for years. It's another thing that is not talked about that a lot of people don't know about. That's why I always try to talk about unity, because I've seen it in action and I've seen us get things done with unity. But if it wasn't for these Africans working together with these Europeans to go into a lot of different places, not just in Europe, but in Asia as well, into a lot of these museums that have a lot of African artifacts, to get these things returned back to the people, because this stuff was stolen. It's stolen property. You know, you can't just go into somebody's country and town because it's in turmoil, because of some kind of war that was basically inflicted on them, and just take their possessions, their valuables. Yet it has been done to us for centuries, of course. A lot of people don't even have a clue that Rome attacked Ethiopia, that Rome and Ethiopia went to war. People don't remember that Rome used chemical weapons on Ethiopia. This was around the time that Haile Selassie was in power, and he went to the United Nations and complained about it. So when people start talking about this Ethiopian Bible and Ethiopian creating Christianity or what have you, they don't know their damn history. They don't know what they're talking about. You have to go back and look at what was going on back then to understand that the Romans was coming in there for hundreds of years, for a long time, destroying shit, stealing artifacts. They pulled down a lot of those obelisks, the one they could pull down. They stole one. And this is what has been going on in so many different places in Africa. It's no coincidence that you go into the Sudan, you go into Ethiopia. As I talked about, what the hell is these people doing with a president, with a constitution that is Roman? And you have the Moors bragging about constitutions and shit like that. And come on, it's bullshit. Pay attention to what this stuff is about. The Roman Senate was set up the same way. They came in there, and you have to understand that we've been warring with these Europeans for a long time, and they have won in every single case. You have some places that's so remote that they don't want to go into, that they leave alone, because for the most part, it's not that much resources there. But any other place, they either turn the people against each other. They find one tribe that doesn't like another tribe, and they arm them or train them to go in there and wipe out other Africans. And we just so lost and don't see what this whole thing is about, that these Africans just do what they got to do sometimes to survive, because they in fear that their village will get wiped out if they don't. But also, a lot of them are, basically poor, and they need, stuff to survive, and supplies or what have you. So we see despicable things happen in Africa, but they are encouraged, influenced, and pushed, and in every way backed by these Europeans and these European powers, and they know exactly what they're doing. So we know why they're in Africa. We got to understand that. But you got to understand, to get back to my point, that, when you go back and look, the reason why this history is important, because it establishes a connection between, India coming into Ethiopia. When we look at those trade routes and understand that the Egyptians was coming down the Nile, that the Indians was coming over into Ethiopia, and they was trading right there. And in the Axumite Empire, the Axumite Empire, they was trading right along the Nile. They was trading with Ethiopia, and all the proof is there. The artifacts is there. The correspondence, the contacts, everything is there to show this connection. And that when you see the influence in Ethiopia, of course you can imagine that the influence when the Indians came into Ethiopia, they could see it. And that when you had the Egyptians travel over to India and, what have you, that the influence definitely was brought there as well. And this is how Buddhism was, basically traveled, and how we can see it accepted by many different cultures. So when we look at the depictions of karate and martial arts and ancient Kemet, we can see that this is clearly where it generated from. Which karate, karate, you have ka, which is your energy or soul. We know Ra, which is the sun, or your pineal gland, your third eye, dealing with the mind. And you have Te, which means you, your body. So we have karate. Karate is mind, body, and soul. When you put it all together, mind, body, and soul as one. So we look at this and understand the spiritual aspect and, the deep connection from karate, and how it can translate into what the ancient Egyptians talked about and what they talk about in spirituality terms and, Buddhism, ancient Kemet, or what have you. So a lot of people, when they look at India, they don't look at India and think about martial arts. And that's crazy, because India has a very ancient history, still to this day, going back with martial arts. We find unbelievable skills. When you think about kickboxing, remember first, you had the people migrate over into India before they even got into Thailand, before they became the Thai people. They was in India first. So which is why we see India taking Buddhism over to Asia, and India taking kickboxing, the fighting techniques into Thailand. So you got to think about that. A lot of people always don't make that connection. When you look at Thai, it is a lot of Indian tradition mixed up in there. When you travel a lot, you see it. When you go back and forth to both places, you can see the mix. You see the elephant a lot. We understand the symbolism behind a lot of these things. But a lot of people don't make that connection with martial arts in India, and they have a history that goes back, past 1000 BCE with martial arts when you look at the Vedas. And the Vedas is basically like it's written in Sanskrit. It's basically the ancient history of Indian literature, put right there. You have the Vedas talking about, martial arts, talking about fighting techniques. You have the Dharmaveda, which translates into the science of archery, where you have them do techniques with the bow and other techniques using other weapons and, martial arts, combat skills or what have you. You have also Malayada, which translates into combat wrestling. And we know how important combat wrestling was, and wrestling was in ancient Kemet, what we talked about before with the Egyptians holding wrestling competitions with the Nubians. So we have Dharma Veda, which goes into the science of archery and the military science of India. You have Malayada, which deals with combat wrestling. And we can see in ancient Kemet clearly, they used the bow. We can see about combat wrestling. We can see how all this stuff, corresponds with each other, and how we find it in the civilizations in ancient Kemet and in India. So it's not a coincidence that we find wrestling in ancient India and we find wrestling in ancient Kemet and Nubia, what have you, because they share a lot of the same spiritualities and practices and what have you. So now we have Bodhidharma. And a lot of people don't know about Bodhidharma unless you really get into Buddhism. And Bodhidharma, which a lot is not known about his young life. He's believed to be a prince, son of an Indian king, and Bodhidharma was a Buddhist monk. Bodhidharma is considered basically the first Chinese patriarch because he's credited with bringing not only Chan Buddhism into China, but being one of the forefathers of Shaolin Kung Fu. So the legend goes with Bodhidharma, he came into China and went to the Shaolin Temple and noticed that the monks there could not meditate for long periods of time without falling asleep. So Bodhidharma, understanding and having the techniques and knowledge about meditation, as I talked about before, when you pay attention to what the ancient Egyptians was using the techniques for, and when you go to Kemet, you can see they have on a lot of the on the walls and a lot of the pillars or what have you, you can see the techniques, the stance that they took in preparing for meditation. So again, this is another one of the ways we can see how the connection comes together with Buddhism and ancient Kemet, because Bodhidharma understood these techniques, and we can look at India as well and understand that yes, they do have an ancient history of martial arts, and obviously, Bodhidharma knew it, and he brought it into the Shaolin Temple in China, and the fact that they recognize him as being the first patriarch is huge. It's huge for Buddhism. It's huge for understanding the history of Buddhism, which a lot of people are ignorant about and believe that Buddhism began in China with the Chinese. And a lot of times when we see monks, we don't always see the monks in India. A lot of people look at the yogis in India and go more towards that, Hinduism or what have you. And a lot of people don't like to make that connection with Buddhism in India and the fact that, the Indians brought Buddhism into China. So you had Bodhidharma bringing Chan Buddhism into China, teaching it to the Chinese, teaching the Shaolin monks these techniques. And a lot of people connect Shaolin with Kung Fu. And they go hand in hand, not knowing that before they ever known Kung Fu, they were just monks who knew no fighting techniques or what have you, until Bodhidharma came in there and began to teach them a series of stances, a series of moves and things to help them develop and to be able to meditate and stay in a meditative position for prolonged periods of time. So Bodhidharma came into the Shaolin Temple and taught them techniques and movements to help build their strength and endurance so they can sit in the meditative lotus position for long periods of time, so they can help and develop with meditation or what have you, so they can have combat techniques and self-defense techniques at their disposal and to use and develop, which of course we know they did. So, a lot of times when you see depictions of Bodhidharma, he looks white. You see him looking white with a long beard. And Bodhidharma was talked about by different civilizations. So, he existed, he's a real dude. So the Japanese talked about him, of course, the Chinese and people in India, what have you. So he's written about by many different civilizations. So this is a real dude that existed. And Bodhidharma, he had blue eyes. They called him the blue-eyed barbarian. And because he was supposedly stocky dude or what have you with this long black beard. He was in good physical shape as they describe him. He was no joke. Now, he probably looked like this guy right here. You understand, African people, we have blue eyes too. Indian people have blue eyes as well. So a lot of people want to, of course, bring them over to the European side and say, yeah, see, Bodhidharma was, European now. We have those eyes as well. We have, of course, the long beards and what have you. And I believe that if you've seen the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen with Nemo, I think this is where they used Bodhidharma when they created Nemo. Even if you go back to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where you have Captain Nemo and everything, it don't really give you an understanding about his origin or what have you. But Jules Verne, the guy who wrote the book, has another book called Mysterious Island, where you have Nemo, basically, whose name was Dakar, who was a prince. Just like you have Bodhidharma, who's a prince, you have Dakar in that book, who's a prince. And he would later become Nemo and, get into science and physics or what have you, and create the Nautilus, the ship or what have you, the sword of the sea and all that. I think that's probably where they got the depiction from, thinking about Bodhidharma and creating Nemo or what have you. A lot of people make that connection. And remember, Nemo was no joke. He kicked ass as far as martial arts. When you look at the movie and when you understand the comics or what have you, and when they show him fighting, clearly this dude was a kung fu master. And a lot of people would never make that connection unless you dig in and doing the research and you start seeing so many different things pop up as relation to Bodhidharma, and how much so many people talked about how bad this dude was and what he meant to China, what he brought to the Chinese people. Now, when you look and pay attention, it's not so many people that we see, movies and even throughout history that we can find from India pertaining to martial arts. I mean, you don't really make that connection too much. I mean, you had Capcom at least put Dao Sim from Street Fighter, in the game. They had a Indian character, powerful and had moves or what have you, and they put him in a game. So they kind of gave people some kind of understanding that possibly India could possess, fighters with, techniques and skills or what have you. But trust me, when you look at the video, when you start reading about it and understand how skilled these people are and what they can do with the bow and fighting, is crazy. These people got skills. And when you look at their techniques and skills and how they move or what have you, it just reminds you a lot of kickboxing, a lot of kung fu, the movement or what have you. You look at Tony Jaa and you look at a lot of these Indian dudes and how they spar, how they move is almost the same. It's almost the same. It's almost identical. It's something I've studied for a long time. It's cool. It's an amazing thing to look at. But it's deep when you understand the true purpose. And this was the true purpose for martial arts. Not so much to develop combat skills and make these different styles and techniques, but to take it back to spirituality, which is, it all basically goes to helping you develop muscle memory and understand about energy and how it flows through the body, which will help you in meditation and will help you in the dream world when you have your subconscious energy projecting you in an energetic state. So as I talked about in energy and in frequency, in the dream state, when you look at that person that is you, the mental projection of your digital self that looks real, and you start to understand movement in the dream, it feels, almost exactly the same as in real life. Everything is kind of cloudy and fuzzy or what have you, but for the most part, you can't really make a determination of, real or not real. You just really, you caught up in a dream state. So when you start understanding the fluidity of movement and energy in the body, and you become familiar with that, you take control of that, it'll be easy for you to break out of it and control that same energy, just like you do in the body on a conscious level, but in the dream state on a subconscious level, once you start getting to that point. Same thing in meditation, when you start getting to that point, when we're talking about you consciously controlling energy that looks like you, that is you, but on an energetic level, and you being able to make those connections in movement because you have the knowledge of muscle memory, how energy flows through the body, and how you're supposed to move using your spiritual body in a meditative state and a dream state. So this all goes hand in hand. It's a big deal. It's really deep when you start getting into it, and it's a lot of books, which some is popping up on the screen now, that you can get into and really start to understand about this stuff and how important it is to have this muscle memory and have this energetic memory and understand how energy is flowing through you and how it's going to help you develop in meditation and help you be able to sustain these long meditative sessions. Because I'm telling you, the monks, when you get to that level, I mean, you talking about these people be meditating for hours, multiple hours, and it's deep. So you got to really have strong muscles and good muscle memory to not have your muscles bother you, with aches and pains while you're in that position for so long. So all this stuff goes really back into consciousness and energy. It's really martial arts used for those purposes to develop and to have, martial arts skills and self-defense skills, and at the same time develop your energy. Now, you see in a lot of those martial arts movies, you have a lot of martial arts masters talking about, using your skills only when needed. To learn all this kung fu, learn about karate and fighting, but not to use it. That was always the thing. You're not supposed to use the stuff. Just use it. It's an art. Use it to develop yourself, develop your energy, but don't use this stuff to harm people unless you have to. And when you have to use your art, you're supposed to do so to defend and protect, not so much to harm unless it absolutely comes down to that point. I know when I was taking it in the military, that's one of the things that they taught us. And, you have to really understand what you can do at that level, how the regular average person has absolutely no clue how much danger they are in when they encounter a person with that kind of skill, which is why it's always encouraged to just use the skill for the spiritual purposes and understanding that while you have these techniques, you're not to really use them. So it's deep, it's crazy. And one of the things you're going to start to find when you start to really dig into all this stuff, especially Buddhism, especially looking at the many martial art forms that exist, which we'll get into a lot of them, not deeply, talk about them, but you see how all this stuff goes back to energy, frequency, vibration, exactly what we were just talking about. So you have what meditation. You have japa meditation, which japa meditation is basically when you meditate with music, with chanting, with mantras. So while you are in the meditative position, you'll basically hum or sing a mantra of something that you wish to obtain, something you're trying to do. And you will hum this mantra, put this mantra out as a song. Because remember, we're talking about music and stimulation. This has to do with vibration and frequency. So while you humming and singing this mantra, you basically run your hand across each mala bead. And you see a lot of times where Buddhist monks carrying the mala beads or the beads, you see, they carry the beads and what have you. Now the thing is, the mala beads, it's 108 beads on that mala. On the mala bead, 108. You can count them for yourself. Trust me, it's 108. We know, if you've seen Frequency DVD, we know 108 translates into 9. Now also, when you go to the Shaolin Temple, when you go to the Tibetan temples, the Buddhist temples or what have you in Tibet and Thailand, it's 108 steps. 108 steps. We're seeing a lot of times, look at the pictures, you see that it's always all these stairs leading up to these temples. Trust me, I know I had to climb when I was in Thailand up to the temple in the sky. If you look at my intro on the video, I think right before one of the last videos is me. It's in the temple in the sky in Thailand. So you go up a lot of steps, 108 steps to get up there to these temples. So again, 108 translates into 9. Another thing, when you look at the 108 auspicious symbols on the bottom of Buddha's feet. Auspicious basically means, promising, favorable. So you have the 108 auspicious symbols on the bottom of Buddha's feet. When I went to Thailand, again, I took the picture with the Buddha statue for a reason. I took a picture by his feet for a reason because I understood what was on the bottom of his feet, which I also clearly took a picture of that. And you have these 108 symbols again. 108 equals 9. Here we have again that number 9 being really important. You know, it's deep when you read about something for so long, when you see pictures of things for so long, and you finally get to go there and see them, you know, and see this stuff. And when you begin to understand, which I try to tell you guys, to understand how important a lot of things is for you to get into your consciousness and understand that it's real. You know, when you start to go to these countries and start making these connections, same thing, you know, when I went to Kemet and everything, you really have a bigger appreciation for this knowledge and for what we're talking about when you actually go there and see it. When you read about the 108 auspicious symbols on the bottom of Buddha's feet, and then you begin to understand the meaning of 108. Same thing in ancient Kemet, when you understand the meaning of 108 and you understand about the frequency and the vibration, the 432 and the 108 and the 54, you know, with the pyramids, and you understand how it corresponds with reality and frequency and vibration and sound and what have you. I mean, all this stuff, when you actually can go there and go and listen to the acoustics, the sound in the pyramids, and start making these connections and putting this stuff together, it becomes so much more real within your consciousness. And it starts to open more doors. Your subconscious starts to understand, okay, you got that. You are coming into knowledge that I have been hiding from you. So I'm going to start releasing little by little, and you'll start to understand things that start popping into your head. This is not spooky stuff. I'm telling you facts from my own experience. Things that start popping into your head, ideas, things that, you know, history, start making more sense. You know, when you start doing more research, you'll start making these connections that you don't know how you made them. And as I said, you know, when you talk about speaking to your higher self, it's you. A lot of people make that statement and think that it's going to be this, you know, other person that you're just going to hear talking with a different voice talking to you. When, you know, your higher self is you. It's going to be you, your subconscious talking to you. You got to understand that it's one consciousness. It's going to be that. It's going to seem normal to you. But your conscious mind is going to understand that, you know, how the hell did I know this? You know, where did this information come from? And you'll start to understand how you start to put stuff together more. The more and more you learn, the more and more you study, the more you let stuff sink in, the more you engage in your education and getting this information, you'll see, you know, doors start to open, barriers start to break down, and you start to make a lot of these connections. So we have the 108 beads on the mala beads. We have the 108 auspicious symbols on Buddha. We have the 108 steps. So you understand when you have the 108 symbols on bottom of Buddha's feet and you have the 108 steps, how it all corresponds with each other. You begin to understand it's the 216, which we know we can get from the 216. We can break it down and still give us 9. It's so deep how it all comes together. You also have the 108 temptations they talk about in Buddhism in Japan. And, you know, the new year, or, you know, every year, they ring the bell 108 times in the Buddhist temples in Japan to symbolize those 108 temptations that you're supposed to overcome in order to reach nirvana. So, and this stuff just goes deep. When you start finding, you know, the numerology fitting in with martial arts and fitting in with Buddhism and the understanding of these things, you start to bring it all together and understand we're talking about the same stuff here, people. The same family. It's all fit together and it's giving you the information in so many different forms that's really going back to one thing with frequency and vibration, which is you. Now, you also have 108 pressure points in the body, depending on who you speak to, but most people agree on that 108 number. And then you have the Goju Ryu katas. You have these martial arts katas that the Chinese and the Japanese deal with. It's a huge thing when you start getting into martial arts. So you have the Goju Ryu katas, which in Japanese you have the Goju Yanho kata, which translates into the 54 steps, which 5 and 4 give you 9. You also have, in China, you have the Super Rinpoche Shaw, which translates into the 108 hands. Now, these katas, when you look at the Super Rinpoche, I'm going to play a video side by side so you can understand it's two different people doing these techniques that are highly skilled techniques that takes, you have to be a master to master these things. It looks like a simple movement and technique, but there's a lot going on as far as sound, vibration, the way that you move, the way that you sound. Every little thing is judged in these katas. These katas they're ancient one, and they're important to developing in any type of skill. And you have these base moves that if you can perform them, it basically says a lot about the level you are at as far as your discipline in, kung fu, Wing Chun, karate, whatever you use, whatever you fight with, whatever style that you take. Doing these katas gives you, so much movement off of them to show where your skill level is. So it's basically like, instead of you doing all this, trying to show off kung fu stuff, you do the Goju Ryu katas, the Goju Yanho, the Super Rinpoche Shaw, and it shows everything right there. It's just like, this is where I'm at as far as my level of skill. When you start to look at a lot of the many techniques in martial arts, you're going to always find 108. I'm not going to go through them all, but I promise you in every single one, 108 is in there. So now, just like I'm fascinated by, what's wrong with us, when we look at what's in ancient Kemet and we look at those pyramids and people just forget about them, there's no real fuss. Like I said before, I feel like everybody should be trying to figure out how the hell it was built and what the civilization was all about, because it's amazing. I feel the same way about 108, the number 9, 216, 432. When you start finding these numbers in everything and people just have no clue when you start seeing it. Now, World Series time, I was just watching the NLDS between Chicago Cubs and the Dodgers. So one of the things I realized the announcer talked about was about how, that the Cubs won the World Series last year, about how, it has been 108 years since the Cubs won the World Series. And they won it last year, 108 years. So you have that. Now, they won in the 10th inning with 8 runs. So you have 10, you have 8, you have 108. Chicago and Gematria equals 27. So you have 9. You have 108 as far as how long it took for them to win another World Series, which gives you 9. You have the 10th inning. Think about this. The 10th inning winning by 8 with a score of 8. So you have 10, you have 8, you have 108, which gives you 9. And you also have Chicago, which gives you 27, which gives you 9. And then you also have 2016, last year when they won, which when you add it gives you 9. I mean, if you had this knowledge, the beginning of the year, you probably could have been a millionaire betting that the Cubs would go all the way because it all lined up. All the numerology lined up and they won. So I try to tell people, and I'm going to give you this information. It's something I was going to save down the line, but I'm going to talk about it briefly here. So when we get to it, you won't be so surprised. And I talked about this briefly. Some people caught on, some people didn't. As I said, sometimes you got to watch this stuff twice and you got to pay attention to everything. A lot of information goes over people's head. But when you pay attention to sports, I get a lot of people saying that, it's rigged. Basketball is rigged. Football is rigged. Listen to me. You can pay a person off. You can pay a ref off. You can pay a player off or what have you. But there's no way you can predict if that player is going to catch that pass for the touchdown. You can't do that. You can't predict if this football player is going to fumble. You can't do that. You can't pay somebody to make every shot, is what I'm trying to say. You can't pay somebody to catch every single ball, to make every single pass, or to never fumble. Money can't buy that. You have to have foreknowledge. And see, these people understand because they can do the numerology. It's not so much that they rigged it, it's that they know. They have a system. It adds up. When it don't add up, they know it's not going to work. They have a system. These people know. So we getting into the stuff on the small term, but these people understand what the formula is. Let's put it like that. What the formula is. Because when you look at this stuff, it's like, damn, you wouldn't know what to add up to get 108 to even figure this stuff out. But then when you look and see that's 108 years, and then we're talking about 2016, what gives you 108. That gives you 9-9. We know Chicago is 27, which gives you 9. And then you see that final score, 10th inning, 8 runs, 108. Mind-boggling shit right there. Now, the crazy thing is when I started to go ahead and look this stuff up to make sure that, I wasn't just tripping, and it pops right up. I mean, you can find it. I mean, on the website for the Cubs and just online, about 108. So I'm like, they're not even really trying to hide the stuff from the people. It's just right there. And that means a lot of people looked at this stuff and probably were shocked. But it's like, so what? To me, if I would have seen that, it would have led to a bunch of shit. I probably would have been stuck. Like, what the hell does that mean? Like, some people see this stuff and they just, so what? We are so dumbed down by entertainment. It's just when you see something so amazing like the pyramids, like this 108 stuff, all this numerology, people just, keep it moving instead of just like, I want to know more. And that's the difference between me and a lot of other people. I get so intrigued when I see impossible things that I want to know what this stuff is about. And I dig more into it and it keeps me going. But stuff is right there, public information for people to see, but they really don't, give a damn about it. But when you look at, the many styles and understand, what the stuff is going back to as far as developing spiritually. They had so many different styles that basically came about after Kung Fu, kickboxing and everything else, Kung Fu and, Wing Chun and karate or what have you. All these different styles and techniques that we later get. So you had back then, you had all these different schools springing up with different fighting styles. And a lot of you people probably seen a lot of the old Kung Fu movies that used to come on when you was younger. And remember how it was. It was always different schools being set up, different styles of fighting. And it was all about whose style was the best. If you opened up another school that taught the same technique as another school that was like, across the way, they would have competitions. But they still would always have competitions to see, what school was the best, what style was the best. And the thing with these styles and techniques, see, when they took these styles and started developing these styles off of, a Shaolin Kung Fu, remember, you got to understand, this is a huge thing right here that a lot of people don't understand, but Bruce Lee did, which we'll get into. But you got to remember that when Bodhidharma came in and started teaching, these was a series of steps, moves, just like how you seen with the katas. These was movement steps that brought about this Kung Fu. this style of fighting. So when you had the other fighting styles branch off and start being developed, they too was different moves, different steps, certain moves made within each unique style that was unique to those styles. So this basically created a problem because, you are limited to those movements within those styles. You are limited to those techniques within those techniques. And, Wing Chun or Kung Fu. With all these styles, when you pay attention to them and look at these techniques that they put out there. So if you have a different style, you know that they are limited to certain movements. So all you would have to do is to really know your style, as well as all the other styles. All these styles were, patterned after certain moves at certain times. It was styles, it was techniques. So all you would have to do was learn each style to understand which one was better. Now, it dealt with movement, of course, speed, strength, and all that came into play. But when you have a technique and you know the movement of that technique, you know how to fight against it. You know how to combat against it. So you have all these moves that almost seem choreographed. It's like steps and patterns and only certain ways that you can move within a technique. And, this is why we're seeing a lot of those Kung Fu fights, back in the day we used to watch on TV. They always look like this. I mean, you could almost make a beat out of it. You could almost predict the next move because it's like they fighting in steps. When you have two different techniques and styles that can only throw punches and movements that's limited within, the style of that technique, then it's almost predictable. And remember, if you watch a lot of those old movies, you always see like, my flying crane style versus your monkey style or what have you, which one is better. The person would win because they would know the moves and they would understand the certain ways you could move within that technique. So again, this is what Bruce Lee, if you study Bruce Lee, then this was his biggest thing. And you have Bruce Lee at a young age talking about this, like around 24, probably younger than that, really getting into the stuff. He was really into Kung Fu, Wing Chun, and a Yip Man or Ippa Man is real. That's the real deal right there. That's really his master that taught him and everything. That's a true story. And, the movie's been cool to watch, but that's a true story about Bruce Lee and his master. A lot of people don't know that Bruce Lee was actually born in San Francisco in America and then moved to China. That he's basically part European. His mom is Euro-Asian. His dad was, Asian, Chinese. So a lot of people don't know that about Bruce Lee. And, he was really into it. Like, this dude was the deepest as far as not just in, studying martial arts, but in his philosophy. He studied philosophy in college. He was a philosophy major. And, this is why Bruce Lee always talked. He was really into this stuff. He had this knowledge down pat at a young age. But Bruce Lee's whole philosophy on it was exactly that you are limited in movement. You can't really move freely in a real fight. I mean, when you look at that video, don't nobody fight like that. I mean, for real. A real fight does not go down like that. A real fight, a person is not going to allow you to execute these certain moves, a certain way. You can't really throw like that. Your body is not going to allow you to throw a punch within a step. You're going to want to move freely within real combat. So Bruce Lee's whole thing was, this stuff is unrealistic. To give you an example about knowing a technique, let's just say, for instance, your style was like a hand clapping game, like pity pat. So the whole style already. The only thing this person is going to be doing is, that's it. The whole style now. So if that's how a person is going to be moving through the whole fight, that's all he can do. That's the whole style. You got him. First move, boom, body blow. It's over. You know how to combat. You know how to fight against that style because all the movements, and the fighter is limited to those movements, so you can get around it. Now, if they doing super fast to where you can't see the movement, I mean, then they got you. The speed comes into play, and if they strong, then they'll knock you out with one, clap, one hand punch. So that comes into play as well. But if you know the techniques and you have a little skill, little speed, little strength, you can win. You can defeat your opponent. And this is what Bruce Lee was talking about, and him growing up studying Wing Chun. The Yip Man taught him, and really getting into the different fighting styles and just his upbringing and the stuff he had to go through once they found out that he was mixed or what have you. He had to fight a lot of bullies and go through a lot of crap, and before he eventually came back to move to America. But he really was into fighting really hard. Like, a lot of people think Bruce Lee was a joke, he was just an actor. This dude is the real deal. I have his books, and I've seen all the autobiographies, just like the same thing I did with Tesla. Everything anybody said about him or anything that he wrote, well, not everything, it's a lot of stuff that's not out there yet, that's not put out to the public, but most of the stuff, everything is out to the public. I have read, I've been through it, I have seen that this dude was amazing, and I would love, to really get into a whole video on Bruce Lee, to really get into his philosophy and what he was trying to accomplish. But when you do study, you understand towards the end, before he was killed, before he died or what have you, I still don't think it was natural. I think it was, we'll talk about that later, but you'll see he changed his attitude as far as technique, because with Jeet Kune Do was still supposed to be like almost like a style, but not really a style. And he wanted to really go away from styles and techniques and really understand what this stuff really goes back to, which is energy. See, Bruce Lee was, considered a Zen Buddhist. He was into Buddhism. He was into philosophy. So he really got into it. He knew history. He studied history. Real big student of history like myself. So he understood that, wait a minute, when this stuff was first brought to us, it was brought to help us develop energetically. And as I said before, what they basically did was take these steps, these techniques used to really develop, your energy or what have you, was basically condensed into, let's just say barbaric fighting, even though it was, eloquent and nice, skillful with fighting, but really they kind of didn't bring everything into the combat skills, into Kung Fu and everything like that. It was more, they had to really transcend bringing the two styles together as far as having everything flow and not be limited to a style and a movement within, these fighting styles. So Bruce Lee took it back to energy, and we always talked about it, when we fight, you got to flow, the movement, everything has to flow, and it has to be, energetic. Remember, he always made the comparison with water, which is, a Chan Buddhist comment, always using water. Remember, he said, empty your mind, be formless like water. He said, you put water in the cup, it becomes the cup. You put it in the bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in the teapot, it becomes a teapot. Water can basically flow, or it can crash. He said, be water, my friend. So he always was talking about, Buddhist things and using Buddhist quotes and, really, explaining his philosophy and so many things that he did. So him, when he first was developing Zhong Fan Kung Fu, which Lee Zhong Fan is Bruce Lee's real name, but when he was developing Zhong Fan Kung Fu, which would become Jeet Kune Do, he was using the art of basically intercepting, which Jeet Kune Do means the intercepting fist, or way of the intercepting fist. So, he was developing a style that basically said, you know what? Everything is styles anyway. All this stuff is based off of movement, and we know that they're going to move this way. They're limited to these styles. So for us, all we got to do is basically attack their style. When they are coming to attack, we attack that. So we intercept the attack with our own attack. And this is was the foundation for what it was based off. So you really had to be fast, which is why Bruce Lee, he was super fast. Everybody talked about how fast he was. And because he had that speed and he matched it with power, which he got his power because of energy, he was able to be so, badass with what he was doing. The philosophy that went into what he was doing was, amazing. And he really got it. But then, like I said, towards the end, after he had the accident and everything with his back, he was like, you know what, this stuff really goes more with energy and developing energetically and understanding how to apply energy and movement and everything. Basically taking it back to the roots and to where the stuff really stemmed from. So you have a lot of people out there still to this day that picked up the philosophy, that studies Bruce Lee, that's really into it. My dad, my uncle, super Bruce Lee fans. I grew up with the stuff. I grew up, karate and kung fu. I grew up around all that. My dad used to have a suitcase under the bed with, you open it up, nunchucks and ninja stars and stuff like that in there. And you had like another suitcase. You open up a bunch of Bruce Lee tapes and books and everything like that. I grew up with the stuff. So I was, at a young age studying Bruce Lee and watching and looking at everything. And you remember around that time, the 80s, so many people was just into, martial arts. Black people, everybody was really into it. And the world, well, America, I should say, we could say the world for that matter, besides China, India, really didn't grasp what the stuff was about, really wasn't introduced to it. Television wasn't that old yet. And a lot of people was getting the knowledge about what the stuff was about and the spirituality behind it, which was hidden until Bruce Lee came. And that was one of the problems people had with him in China, that he was bringing the techniques and skills. Not only that, he was being critical of it, and he was basically hinting towards the true essence of it, which is the spirituality that it stems from. Now, Bruce Lee, he proved his point. Like everywhere he went, he would always try to prove his point and show why his style was better. The flaws of the old styles and techniques and being limited to those styles. And, in his movies, I mean, when you look at Return of the Dragon, if you remember the whole fight with Chuck Norris, that's basically, Jung Fan Gung Fu right there. That is basically Jeet Kune Do right there. And he was basically showing you exactly what it's about. Because he began the fighting, Wing Chun, if you know the style. And Chuck Norris, his karate was superior, his skills was better, he was taking him out. You remember, beating his ass at first. So, what did Bruce start doing? Okay, bam, I'm just going to go into my style. He started, dancing around. And it was superior. His style was better. He adapted that way. Remember how it was going down. Every time Chuck was throwing in a punch, boom, he would, inside leg kick or counter him really quick. And the fight was basically over. And remember, towards the end, Chuck Norris was like, you know what, I'm going to try this shit myself. And started jumping around and tried to basically copy what Bruce was doing. Because he was like, damn, how the hell he just switched up the style and now I'm defeated. So, even though it's just a movie, it's what he was trying to show in the movie, how you can switch up the style and basically, when you apply these different methods, you can render any style useless. And he proved his point. And you have so many people that back that up. And there's a lot of stories out there about Bruce that's amazing. It's amazing. But, we look at the whole thing. And, I believe Bruce was killed, ran into. No, Dan, come on. No coincidence. I mean, the stories, conflicting stories about Bruce Lee, which is weird. And, I think Chuck Norris, to be honest, was told to kind of spread the official story. Reason why I say that, because every time they ask Chuck Norris about Bruce Lee, it's the same answer, and he'll go out his way to note that he had a stroke or he had an aneurysm or what have you. Instead of going anywhere else, he will always make sure he said it. Instead of just saying, when he died, you say, well, Bruce had a stroke or Bruce had an aneurysm or what have you. Instead of just saying, when he died. And the explanation he gave was just like, it was weird. But, people say, he hurt his back, lifting weights. And he was bedridden for a while, But then Bruce was Bruce. And meditation and what have you, they told him he wasn't going to ever kick again. And he came back from that, of course. But he had to take pills. And supposedly when he was at this one actress house in China, rehearsing or what have you, he got a headache And she gave him a pill that basically conflicted with his medication and caused his brain to swell to the point where, like, you know, he had brain vessels that popped in his brain, and, you know, he basically died. And, you know, it's conflicting stories about the whole thing. You know, some people said that he already had, like, you know, had issues and he was taking pills for that, for some kind of brain problems he had, and all kinds of stuff like that. The whole thing is, when you read about Bruce and you hear people talk about him, his wife and, you know, his daughter, even when Brandon Lee was alive, when he talked about him, how fit this dude was, you know, how he really was big about nutrition and about you know, taking care of his body. And I mean, we're talking about the 70s. They wasn't that ignorant about combining medications. He would have known what not to take. You know, he would have known, like, hey, I can't take this, and this is not going to go with that. It's just weird how the whole thing went down. Me personally, it's just what I think. I think she switched the pills somehow, and he was given the wrong pill, and, you know, what have you. And, you know, Brandon Lee death is even more stupider. I mean, God, I can't believe that's how he went out. The son of Bruce Lee went out like that. I mean, even Bruce Lee going out the way he went out, Brandon Lee getting killed by a stunt gun. Now, I went to film school in Hollywood, in LA, and I know about prop guns, took all that, understand how it works. One, now you have an expert on a set to help you with any kind of prop gun that's actually can be modified into a real gun or is a real gun. They always clear the gun before every scene. It's just one of the things that's done. If you're going to have a scene with your lead actor, with the star, basically having a real gun pointed at him, before the scene goes down, you're going to make sure that the gun is clear. So what's supposed to have happened with Brandon Lee was, you know, they had the real gun. They basically took real bullets and modified them to become blanks. Now, when they was testing the gun, one of the lead dislodged from one of the bullets and was stuck inside the barrel of the gun. This is their explanation. So they said for 2 weeks, you had this lead in the barrel of the gun. And when they went to do the scene where he's supposed to get shot, they put, you know, a blank in there, but with powder in it to give it a flash. So basically what they would do, they would pull basically the lead from the front, the lead that, you know, it kills you, the bullet. They would pull that out and then put in a charge, a shell with enough to give you a flash from the gun. But what this did when they shot it was it just pushed the bullet completely out of the gun and shot and killed him, which it don't make sense. It's like, well, okay, well, if y'all was using the gun before and it got lodged in the gun, the slug, how the hell did it fire out when it was lodged in the gun, when it never came out in the first place? And if it was in there in a way where it just fell out and it was in the gun loose, as soon as you pick up the gun, it's going to fall out. It's designed to come out the gun, to come out the barrel. So why didn't it just fall out then when it was, you know, moving it around? So, and then, you know, when they checked the gun, the barrel, of course, to make sure nothing was in there, everything was fine. It just don't fit. It don't make sense. Now, I don't know why they was killed. You know, I don't know what the true purpose is. We probably will never know. But I just find it weird. I don't believe in the curse bullshit, what have you. I think it's stupid. But it's just, I find it weird. Now, the thing with Bruce Lee, why I look at it as far as, you know, him, you know, the rumors are not rumors. They are true that you had the triad and you had people in China that was not liking Bruce Lee teaching because he was teaching white people. If you remember, like Bruce Lee was given a challenge that he had to fight. Now, I forget his name. And he had to fight for the right to teach white people and people who was not Chinese. So Bruce Lee was supposed to fight, and if he lost the fight, he could no longer teach white people or people who wasn't Chinese. And of course, he won the fight, you know, fast. And he made the guy tap. So he earned the right to teach or what have you. So people could have been pissed about that, what have you. That's what a lot of people allude to. And, you know, Bruce Lee was a champion of equal rights. That's one of the things a lot of people don't know that he talked about. You know, remember in his dojos, the pictures are out there. He didn't care what color you was, of course. He didn't care about none of that stuff. He was always talking about, equal rights, and he was a champion about that. He talked about this. So you had black people coming in. Remember, you had a lot of black people in the movies. So to me, when I look at the whole thing and understand about how the powers that be work, Bruce Lee philosophy is what got him killed to me. I think them listening to him talk, and when I look at some of the interviews and listen to the questions they asked him, and I was like, why would they ask these questions? And the answers he gave was like, he know too much, which to me points to why they would give him something that made his brain swell. You want to be smart. That's how these motherfuckers is. You want to be smart. You think you know everything. You know it all. Brain gonna swell and kill you. And that's how these people operate and stuff like that. His brain swell up and blood vessels pop because they say you got a big head, you know too much. He was a philosopher. It's just all signs point to that. So he was teaching so many black people. He had them in the movies, Kareem, Jim Kelly, what have you. And if you remember 60s, 70s, 80s even, black kung fu schools and karate schools was opening up everywhere. And so many people was following Bruce Lee and his philosophy. And, hit kung fu and, karate, martial arts is synonymous with Bruce Lee. Even kids today, the little kids today, know who Bruce Lee is. That's amazing. They know who he is without you telling them. They already know about Bruce Lee. So even still to this day, his name it ring bells. It's a household name. So him teaching that philosophy and having black people learn it, I think they was afraid that we would trace it back and understand where it come from. It already was bad enough that the pictures surfaced of kung fu originating in ancient Kemet, or being the oldest example of kung fu and fighting martial arts found in ancient Kemet. Then you have Bruce, wearing shirts with the Ankh on it, lotus shirts, flowers and what have you on it, and talking about equal rights and everything, having black people in his movies or what have you. All of this to the powers that be was like, Then they looked at Bruce Lee and what he just went through and understood that this dude had it. Like, he wasn't a fake, a phony. Bruce, he did it. He had it all. Who knows where he was at, energetically on a spiritual level. And I think that when they seen that, wait a minute, this dude just had a back problem to where they said he would never kick or fight again. Not only through his own words, all he did was meditate, read books, and basically eat vegetables, soups. He did his regular personal rehabilitation, but that's all he did. And this dude basically came back from down there being paralyzed. And not only did he come back, he was a better fighter than he ever was before. That's the crazy part. So, it's just them looking at that and seeing that this dude is really tapping into some ancient knowledge that I do not want these people to have. And Bruce Lee was willingly, freely putting it out there. He had actors and everything signing up on special classes and special sessions with him. It's something he talked about too. He was teaching, and he was, not shy about it. And he talked about it a lot, and he was putting that information out there. And we were soaking it up more than anybody else, black people. I mean, we was his biggest supporters besides, most of the people in China. But black people was supporting Bruce 100%. As I talked about with all the schools opening, if you remember again back on that time, remember when The Last Dragon came out in the 80s. I mean, that's really basically how it was. Everybody walking around and so many people into karate or what have you. And, The Last Dragon, that movie, what did it talk about? Mind, body, soul, one, the energy, the glow, all that stuff was in there. It talked about Bruce Lee as well. So it's showing what we knew, what we learned, and what we was picking up, and having so many black people within that context of learning, not just martial arts and how to fight and defend themselves, but also learning about meditation, spirituality, and it had to go. So when Bruce died, 73, I believe it was, we had everything else happen after that. 80s come, Bruce Lee's dead and gone. We had then, the crack epidemic. We had hip hop come in. And then karate became a joke. It became a joke. Remember, it was like, look at this nigga trying to do karate. When you was trying to street fight, put up your dudes, fight, fists. And somebody tried to do some kung fu stuff, they got laughed at. Remember, it turned into a joke. It went from us, and that's how they do us. It went from us, opening up schools, being champions. You have people like Billy Blanks. Even Michael Jai White, a lot of people don't know he competed, for real. Michael Jai White, the dude who played Spawn and in so many different movies. Bone, this dude got skills. He's a real fighter, just like Billy Blanks. Who I meant to say before, Billy Blanks competed. People like Billy Blanks and Michael Jai White, a lot of black fighters competed around the world. And we was really into it. So, we went from, having people like Jim Kelly and, Billy Blanks and all these other black athletes and people who was into it to, nothing, to it all being gone, schools being shut down, and it turning into a joke. So we know they take away anything that has to do with true spirituality in our past, our real history. And again, to me, this is why Bruce was killed. And they was probably afraid that Brandon was going to, bring the same philosophy and start really bringing up his father. It looked like in the beginning, maybe he wasn't. But, he started getting a lot of movie roles and doing a lot of things. And maybe it was something he said or did, or maybe they didn't want to take a chance. But they got him out of there. I refuse to believe that both of these cases are a result of accidents. I just can't believe that. I can't. And, this is how they do us. So, in understanding the true purpose of the martial arts and what it goes back to and how we can go back and bring all this stuff into Buddhism, energy, meditation, even the nine, and understand how it deals with numerology and the number that deals with existence itself. Everything that the ancients talked about, everything that we're going to be studying coming up. And, this is just one video, by the way, of a bunch of videos I'm about to put out like all at once because I'm going to disappear for a little while. Got some business to handle and some work to take care of. So I'm about to drop like a bunch of DVDs at once and then, probably chill for a little bit to take care of this work. But understand from here on out, I have already in my plans exactly the videos I want to put out, the DVDs I want to put out, what they're going to be about or what have you, to tell the story that I want to tell and give the information that I want to give, leading all the way up to the last DVD, and then that'll be it. I don't know exactly when that will be, but I can't do this forever, as I said before. But it's not going to be no time soon, I don't think. But we trace this stuff back and see how it all come together. In Buddhism 3, I had to really do this one to show you exactly that and how it all goes into the frequency and vibration and energy, and how this whole thing that we're studying, dealing with spirituality and what the ancients talked about, all goes together hand in hand. All we did was change give it names, change how it's pronounced, and really try to make it fit what we interpret, how we interpret things. But to the ancients, it was what it was. It was natural, it was nature, and we call it energy and frequency and vibration. But to them, it was just something that was natural. So now, even with Dragon Ball Z, and I always like to use Dragon Ball Z because they're showing you so much. You had Krillin in it, who was basically like a Buddhist monk. Remember, Krillin is the one they always point to as being the weakest, but by human standards, this dude is in no way weak. He's a powerful monk, a powerful dude that can do powerful things. It's amazing what he can do. But, they put everything right there for you. As I talked about with the Dragon Balls, the chakras or what have you, and the dragon, Kundalini energy, what have you. And we understand what Goku and, Kung Fu, karate, martial arts. He's a martial artist. The techniques that he used, the type of training he does, his skills is all geared towards the martial arts. We see him with meditation. We see with the way he fights and what he's doing, how all this stuff comes together. Now, Akira Toriyama is basically giving you Buddhism in Dragon Ball Z and showing you, what this stuff can lead to. And there's a lot of spirituality wrapped up in the Dragon Ball Z sagas of what it's getting into as far as energy. developing your energy, growing your energy, or what have you. Then you look into the whole aspect of it with reincarnation. I mean, how many times Goku then reincarnated, died, and came back? He came back because of what? They got the Dragon Balls together and was able to wish him back, symbolically talking about, Kundalini energy and coming back, rebirth, reincarnation. So the themes of Buddhism, the themes of what they talk about in ancient Kemet, we can see in Dragon Ball Z and see what it's talking about. There's so much spirituality wrapped up in it. And when you understand, the power that he has and the stuff he's able to do, which seems to be like no limit, you really start to get what they're talking about as far as us being, truly in power and truly controlling all of our energy and what we're capable of doing with the knowledge of, how to do it. Buddhism is geared towards more of the understanding that Satan or evil is in the world. And that's the biggest thing. That's the best thing about it. Because with Buddhism, it's understanding that, there is suffering. And when you start to put the pieces together, understand that, it's suffering because these people run everything, control everything, and because their actions, because we can't stop them, and, many people think we'll never be able to, there will be suffering. Plain and simple. It's just something to almost get you to cope with that fact. And I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to cope with that fact. You got to cope with it. You got to deal with it how you deal with it. But my whole point is for us to get rid of it at some point in time. We can't let it just go on and let these people keep winning and just, conform to the oppression, conform to what they're doing. Knowledge is the only way we're going to be able to break through it. So Buddhism and this whole, the ancient Egyptian spirituality, all, as we can see, as I have shown you, dealing with rebirth. We talked about with the Matrix, with Buddhism talking about reincarnation, rebirth, which deals with ancient Egyptian philosophy as well as Buddhism. And it's talking about rebirth. Everything is about that. You coming back and you doing what's right and doing what you need to do so you do not have to come back and deal with suffering, pain. The whole metaphysics or the metaphorical understanding of hell is life. It's earth. It's here. This is hell. If you don't understand that yet, this is what it's trying to tell you. Suffering. Remember, they tell you in hell it's going to be suffering and gnashing of teeth or what have you, blah, 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 blah. This is what it's talking about. It's nothing that you going to find in the Bible that Satan did that you haven't seen in real life. You've seen worse in real life. Plain and simple. This is hell. This is what you are trying to stop your soul from coming back to and being, subjected to, is this. So when we talk about, karma, karmic consequences, this is what it all leads to. Because in understanding that Satan is the God of this world and Satan controls the material world, you got to understand that we help him. We're aiding in that because these corporations, these companies that control all this stuff is controlled by us. We work for them. We help them do what they do. And because you want a shirt or a phone or a car or what have you, it's going to cause the suffering of some people somewhere, because you don't have a certain amount of money. And they're blasting everywhere, advertising of, food, cars, clothes, homes, or what have you. The people who have the money is going to be fine. They can get it. But the people, the majority of the world who do not, is going to suffer because they're going to be left wanting. Wanting is a part of suffering. And they're going to be left wanting for these things. And it's going to create suffering. It's going to cause them to do things in life geared towards getting money. Not even, they don't even want the product. They want money. People always say, I need to get a new car. I got to get my money together. And as people think about it, it's just like, forget the car. I want the money. It's like, which one will you take, the car or the money? And it's like, damn, I thought it was about the car, but really it's the money, the root of all evil. Money has power. It has a hold on people. That's why they say you should burn $1. You get $1, burn it. and release the spiritual hold that it has on you. A lot of people are like, shit, burn a dollar, you crazy, because it has a hold on you. But they understood this thousands of years ago, the way the world would head because of the powers that be and the direction it was moving in. The ancient Egyptians, the Buddhists, is trying to tell you, life is suffering. The real heaven, is death. Death is the real freedom. When you die, it's the real freedom. It's the real life. Because then you're completely free. You're truly free to do, to create, to have anything and all possibility that's possible for you to have. You can have it. So think about that. And when you look at the fact that you have these corporations that represent Satan, as I said, and us working for these companies, for these corporations, and having to give money to the government, and that basically our work, our energy goes into running Satan's machine. And that's what we're doing. We are running hell. We are the wardens of hell. We're running hell. And just like you have in private prisons with them working and making these corporations a lot of money, when you go to work, you are doing the same. And they have karmic consequences that we don't understand. So it goes into frequency, vibration, as I said. Like attracts like. You may not understand what your job does truly. You may work for Nike or sneaker company or what have you, and you don't understand that because you're working for this company are doing some despicable things throughout the world. It's causing suffering and problems throughout the world. You work for this company, but you don't see it. You just, all I do is make copies. That's all you do. But you're still contributing to something. Karmic consequences is what it's talking about. There will be karmic consequences of you putting out evil. So a lot of people walk around, they don't understand why bad shit happens to them in life. Why did this happen? Why, I didn't do nothing wrong. A lot of people walk around and stuff happens in their life that's bad and they just can't fathom it. Which is why people, run to religion, not understanding that you're working or doing something that's having karmic consequences. You got to understand what you put out comes back. If you don't believe in anything, understand that what you put out comes back. So you helping to put out this energy, it comes back to you in little subtle ways. Lose your keys, what have you. It may sound stupid to you, but it comes back to you in little ways. And the only way to combat it, to fight it, is to be conscious of it and to understand that this is possible. And by putting out, different frequencies of good vibes, frequencies of love, peace, or what have you, you crush all that, you distort all that, because now you're only going to attract these things instead of you walking around oblivious up to the fact that there will be karmic consequences. You have no idea of it. You don't know nothing about it. So now you automatically putting out this frequency and attracting bad stuff because you have no clue about it. You're not aware of it. When I say to you, getting this information into your subconscious is important because it's going to be your subconscious is going to put that energy out there anyway. This is why I say that. So now you are knowledgeable of it. Damn, I work for this company. This company may not be that good, but I'm not with all that stuff. So now you're conscious of it, your energy is conscious of it, and it's not going to seek after any bad energy. This is one of the reasons why the Bible says, not to be rich. Because when you are rich, and this is why Buddhists, when you pay attention, they live off the people. When they get food, they don't have no kitchens, and they don't be cooking or nothing like that. The Buddhists, they live off the people. The people give them food or what have you. They have a picture here where you see the Buddhist, the monk. Basically, this is when I was in Thailand. You see the monk getting food from the marketplaces. A lot of times, these people, they're really spiritual. They'll bring them food, or the monks will come by on their little boats, and people just drop food in there. So they live off the land, they live off the people, they live off kindness or what have you. They don't have no material possessions. Just their bowl. And that's what the monks will tell y'all. When you bring your bowl, that's it. Just bring your bowl. So when you have people that's rich, they're a part of an energy, of a frequency of rich people. That's why the rich, they attract other rich people. They stick together. You can't be rich and be around broke people and be on the same frequency. It's not going to work that way, because all you're doing in your frequency is causing problems with them on their frequency, because you rich You have no problems, no issues, or what have you. They're poor. The only thing they're trying to do is get to where you at. You know, you're causing suffering because to them they like, help me out. But true rich people can talk about things, talk about business, talk about things that's on their frequency. The problem is these rich people that come together are probably causing a lot of suffering because of that money. Not just one, you have money, which now you have to keep that money. You have to really focus on keeping material possessions. It's tough. It's something that's hard to do. To have that kind of wealth, you have to be really spiritually conscious of what's going on or what you're doing or what you're putting out there. And trust me, there are quite a few people who are rich who understand this. Where you see a lot of rich people are really into Buddhism and really into controlling energy and controlling what they put out. I talked about in the Voodoo DVD, which Voodoo is like one of the Voodoo DVD is probably, I think, the top, besides Saturn Sign series, the DVD that sells. Everybody liked that DVD, which is why I'm putting out a part 2, because there's a lot more I need to get into. But when I talked about in the Voodoo DVD about people who practice Voodoo, how they don't like to use it, for bad purposes because they understand about karma. It comes back. And it's the same thing. People who get into this knowledge, which a lot of these people that's up there, they know about this stuff. They understand. So they try to block what they do and have protection for what they do. This government system, as I said before, nothing that they do is illegal. Everything they're doing is justified as far as looking at it on a different level. They understand the rules. But we are helping them. One, we have signed away our rights and privileges, and we are letting this government system do whatever they want. It's us. They are putting out necessary paperwork. They're having elections and everything they're doing it, and we are falling for it. So to them, really, legally, if you look at everything, they can get away with it all because we are allowing it to happen. And it's like, okay, well, if you thought this was a problem or issue, how come you didn't do anything? Because the people, we are so blinded and confused by the distraction that we're not seeing, what's really going on. But all this stuff goes back to karmic consequences and understanding why a lot of this stuff happens and why a lot of people bring a lot of bad energy and attract bad frequencies to their life because they are basically in these environments that breed this stuff. So it's something to be conscious of. But these corporations create suffering. All the employees are suffering. You work to live, literally. You work to live. You work to get material possessions, plain and simple. You work, you give your energy to these corporations that's doing evil to get material possessions. You go home, you suffer. You go home, you sit down, you turn on the TV, and you suffer some more. You go online and you scroll up and down the Facebook timeline or Instagram timeline, and you suffer more. You see things that you want. You see things that you need. You see things that you cannot have, and you suffer. It's constant suffering, emotional stuff. And to you, it may be small stuff. You may think, if I do this, I can get it. But that's wanting. That's wanting, which is suffering. If I do that, I can get it. You're still wanting. And you should be able to have. And that's the thing. It's like, for what? What reason that you don't have what you want? What is the reason why you don't have food or the basic necessary essentials to live? And you have, billions of people living that way. Homeless, nothing, suffering, pain, death. All of this being caused by material and the people who control the material. And Buddhism is really what this stuff is all talking about and getting you prepared for and getting you to understand that when you break it down, if you want to really get into, just, the overall understanding and meaning of peace, happiness, joy, love, what have you, there should not be no money system. Nobody should have to work to live or survive or for something that they want. Understanding that a real civilization, based off love, unity, will not have these things. Of course, you got to work and do stuff to keep civilization going, but it's fun when you're working towards something that's going to help you and other people. That's a fun job. That's something fun to do. It's not even a job. It's not even work. It's something that must be done. So, planting food and, vegetables and what have you and fruit, doing stuff like that, helping to build homes and everything where, of course, the person don't have to pay rent or no bills, making sure people are fed and making sure stuff is clean. If this was one, united people around the world, this is what we would be doing. Instead of working, to pay your phone bill, cable bill, what have you, the stuff wouldn't matter. But they have basically created a civilization, a world where all this stuff is important. It's all based off material, and it's all the root cause of suffering that so many people is dealing with. So when you think about why Buddhists live the way they live, small villages, you have the monks way up high, 108 steps high away from modern civilizations or what have you, living, you're living in a community where it's not going to be any suffering, where their actions don't create suffering. There is no karmic consequences because they're living right. They're doing the right thing. Again, one of the reasons why the Bible says, do not be in the world. Do not love the world. If you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you. This is what it's talking about when they say these type of things, because you can't be in the city and living in the city and not cause suffering. And again, it's just something that we don't understand by, buying your sneakers, buying your book bag, buying, your phone, suffering. And all this stuff is attached. And I don't want to stress anybody out by thinking about it on, that broad of a sense. But when you trace it back in essence, you understand what I'm trying to say. You understand that when you go buy cell phones and stuff like that, in Africa, people are killed for those minerals that's in the phone. People die because of that. And to you, it may be like, it's not me, it's the people that killed them. But if we all stopped buying the phones, this stuff wouldn't happen. If we all did something about it and say, hey, they shouldn't be killed, let's manage this stuff to where nobody has to die because of a phone. We're not doing any of that. We're not doing that. It's just gimme. Me. Karmic consequences. And the stuff that everybody got to face. And if you're not aware of it or even putting out or meditating and putting out who you are, your essence and what you're about to, your subconscious, to the universe, let it know, hey, this is not what I'm about, then, you face, consequences. And everybody talks about because of the storms and everything, well, America is going to get what it deserves, and the Bible's saying this and that. The Bible was telling you exactly what they're going to do. Now, how they're going to blame it on people. Plain and simple. They're going to take the role of God, which I said they're God, and say that, this is karma. That's going to happen to America. New York is going to be nuked or what have you, or something that's going to happen to devastate America. And people are going to blame it on karma. They're going to blame it on the selfish nature of the American people, the racist nature, the hate and all of the us looking away while so many people suffer. That's what people are going to look at and say, well, they deserved it. They deserved it because they caused so much suffering in the world. And as I said to you before, we can stop it. White America can stop it all, but they won't because they're ignorant and they're too focused on what we don't, being racist and a bunch of other stupid shit that don't matter. Not paying attention to the fact that you supporting Trump and, he's responsible for bombing and killing a bunch of kids and babies, just like Obama, just like Bush, just like Clinton, just like Reagan. They're responsible for murder, death, genocide on this planet, going back. Support the troops. It's about the troops. The troops are murderers. It's one of the reasons why I got out. Murderers. You're going around and killing people, causing harm, causing suffering on this planet by being a part of that military. It's just, it all fits, it all goes together. When you start understanding about frequency and vibration, how all this stuff is attached, while people like Jordan Maxwell and others warned you and said, hey, It's a universal law out there, universal God, universal power that men have called God that exists, and they don't give a damn about none of this stuff that you talking about. There are laws, there are rules that exist, and we have seen them. These people are smart. They protected themselves. It's deeper than I'm talking about, but we'll get into it. But they protected themselves in so many different ways to where it's only going to be us that can make them pay for what they're doing or bring it to the attention of those who can make them pay. And that's something that we have not been able to do in this state. And that's something else we'll get into down the line. But it's a lot. And wanted to do part 3 to really get you into that understanding and understand what Buddhism, what martial arts, and how, what the stuff is about, and how it all ties into ancient Kemet, everything else, and to a lot of the history. So much more history to get into Africa that points to so many different things. And we're going to get into all this stuff and break it all down and go through it and connect dots. But, this was Buddhism 3. I wanted to get this out. Thank you guys for watching and purchasing and supporting. And this is a nice part that's going to segue into some other stuff later. But, definitely glad you purchased and watched. And hopefully you've seen everything up to this point, because it's a lot that's coming up that's going to really gear towards a lot of the older videos and start bringing stuff together. So, yeah. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch and purchase and support. New videos on YouTube. A lot more DVDs coming out because, as I said, I want to get this stuff out before I take this little break and get some work done. But, yeah, appreciate the support. See you guys next video.